Our sponsors for this episode are Hall's Tree Service. Locally owned and operated, Hall's Tree Service has been exceeding and surpassing customer demands in Newton and the surrounding area for over 40 years. Larry and his crew are guaranteed to work hard for you. There's no tree too tall, no job too small. Call Hall's at 316-772-1919. Absolute drain. Look, no one, and I mean no one, likes it when their sink, bathtub, washing machine, or especially their toilets start backing up. It's even worse when they won't drain or flush at all. No matter who you are, it happens to us all. If this is happening to you, then you need to give Garth with Absolute Drain a call. Absolute Drain is located at 420 West Broadway in Newton and has been faithfully serving Newton and surrounding areas for longer than I can even remember. I personally use Absolute Drain, and they have kept my pipes cleaned out and flowing day one. It might just be time for you to give them a call too at 316-283-7264. The Newton Kansan is Newton's longest-running local newspaper covering all the stories, people, places, and things happening in our community. Chad Fry, the Kansan guy, editor of the Kansan, works diligently to ensure integrity, accuracy, and unbiased news is delivered to your doorstep 3 times a week for an unbeatable price. You can also sign up for online-only access for around $7 a month. That's 12 online papers a month for only $7. If you've not subscribed, it's time you do. Visit them in their office at 517 North Main Street. That's 517 North Main Street in Newton. Online at thekansan.com. That's thekansan.com. Or give them a call at 316-283-1500. That's 316-283-1500. Support local journalism, support the Kansan. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this HCTalk podcast. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley, and my co-partner in crime, brother from another mother, to spread as much hate and discontent or love and affection dependent upon what you think, how you feel in this very moment about what is said, is Andy Ortiz, local businessman and entrepreneur. How are you doing today, Andy?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I gotta say, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. I after our podcast last week, I went back and I just started. You struck a nerve with me. I'll just say that, in a good way. In a good way, right?
Well,
because sometimes I think about 10,000 few foot things that we talk a lot about what's going on nationally. We talk about what's going on in Congress, and then you. In a way, you said, I'm looking for like what's relevant, right? What's relevant? What I'm worried about right now is people that can't, that are stressing over that extra gallon of gas, that are sitting here having these financial economic issues based upon where they're at their current standard, right? So I went back and I said, I want to take a snapshot, right? I want to see what did a loaf of bread cost 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and today. What did a pound of beef cost 10 years ago, 5 years ago, today? And granted, folks, that's just a snapshot. That's not, I figured 10 years is relevant, right? That spans a couple different administrations. That's Trump, then Biden, then Trump again. That's so I'm not saying, that understanding, well, I could go back to 1960 and then, there would just be this, a loaf of bread cost 10 cents in 1960, and today, I'm not trying to say anything other than what maybe the fact is, right? And we were talking before the program as far as facts versus feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings, and even I was somewhat surprised in a little bit of what I found out. But just real quick, Andy, if you don't mind me doing this, and it might take a couple minutes or so, but what I want to do is I'm going to put the camera on Andy, so that way it's not everybody's not watching me sit here and read off of stuff. But just going through this, okay. First off, the national average for a gallon of regular gas today is $3.92. 5 years ago, it was $3.09, and 10 years ago, it was $2.20. Right? So over 10 years, we've almost doubled. Okay? Then the median household income today is, and this was a little bit of a question for me. 10 years ago was roughly $57,000. 5 years ago was roughly $60,000, and today it's about $70,000, right? Which I question that, okay? Because I'll just keep going here, okay? Because we got to think about the fact that when we're looking at national averages, and I tried to throw some Kansas in here, right? So that way it's specific to us, not in California, a house costs $500,000 on average, and in Kansas it costs X amount of dollars. So I'm trying to figure out how not to get skewed statistics based upon geographical or regional data, right? The average hourly wage for an individual in the private sector in the state of Kansas is approximately $32.48. It said that in 5 years ago that it was $21.87, and 10 years ago it was pretty much similar, a little bit less. Now the state minimum wage is $7.25. A pound of ground beef today is $6.75 per pound. 5 years ago was $4.50, and 10 years ago was $3.75. Average of 1 pound loaf of bread 10 years ago was $1.41. 5 years ago $1.41, and then today is $1.83. So not a huge uptick, but an uptick. In Kansas, the median home price is around $265 to $294. So we'll go with the high end, right? It's $300,000. 10 years ago, the median home price was $133,000. 5 years ago, it was $220,000, and today is close to $300,000. Another one, we're going to go with. I think I already said something about the median household income, but I want to stop here. I did this on purpose. National average mean household income is between $75,000 and $80,000. Earnings hovering around $31,000 for women and $42,000 for men. Now, what you said, the data backs that up. If I look at yesterday, right, how much something cost, or then 5 years and then 10 years, we're seeing prices almost double in some of these areas. So I thought, well, let's look at wages, right? And basically what it said, I mean, I'm just going to short phrase it here, but through my research, what I found was 10 years ago to 5 years ago, the average wage went up about $10,000. And then 5 years ago today, that same wage has gone up $10,000. But I'm really trying to understand that because, well, how many people do you know are making $20,000 more today than they were 10 years ago?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I sit with people from all different kinds of industries, right, in the world that I live in. And I think if you take this over 100 years, what you're going to find is the average rate of inflation is about 3%, right? So I love the 10-year snippet because kind of on the microcosm, what you're doing is you're bringing out the here and now over two administrations. Some of the fluff in there is going to be what they will say 50 years from now is what happened when we infused all this money into the economy over the COVID situation. And whatever you think about that situation, there was a lot of money printed with no goods or services backing it. There was a lot of fraud that took place. There was a lot of businesses that stayed open, a lot of businesses that closed, a lot of businesses that took that money right before they closed just to make it until they pivoted and figured something else out. So there was a lot of support that, the American government brought into communities, which we're paying for it now. And so you'll probably see a blip on that. But what I would do if I was a betting guy, if you read war books and Sun Tzu and some of these things over time, you're going to see that strategies and things play out in multiples over time, right? So what I mean by that is it's probably going to end up 3% still in 50 years from now, right, if we don't have some kind of major collapse like the Great Depression, right? So if you just do the math, right, if you're getting a 2% increase on average in your COLA, right, for your company, correct, 1.5, 2%, and the people get excited, I got a raise after a year of their service. Well, if every year the inflation is going up 3%, you do that over 30 years, well, what just happened? Now you're talking 30 points.
Right.
Not 1.5 or 1 point. And when we get fancy, the average individual, and I don't mean average, like people that go to 9 to 5, the majority of middle class America, which is our bread and butter, it's what makes our country so great, right? The dwindling middle class, right, which is what freaks me out, frankly. They're struggling. and they're pissed off and they're tired of the games and the politics and the two-party system that we were discussing last week, right? And how ridiculous it is that we're just getting played in the middle.
Right.
And that's our middle class,
right.
The heartbeat of our country.
Speaking of middle class, I also did a breakdown on that to try to understand a little bit where maybe somebody would fit in. The housing thing has really opened my eyes, right? When we talk about a pound of beef, yeah, that's a lot. That's almost double, right? Over 10 years, what you would pay for a pound of beef. So that's something that people consume, right? The loaf of bread, not so bad, right? Loaf of bread, but you also got to look at what it costs to produce a loaf of bread and what goes into that versus what, like for instance, you plant it and it grows. I'm being very simple, and then you harvest it and then you turn it into bread. Very simple. Cattle, on the other hand, not so much, because, well, you have the upkeep of the livestock in general, which is increasing, right? It costs more to do everything,
feed them.
And then feed them. That's another thing, because
Property taxes going up, so the property they sit on costs more to maintain.
Exactly.
Gas to get them to the butchers or to the sales.
Right. And
yard,
so with that being said, okay, currently, below $50,000 a year income would be considered lower income. This group faces severe financial hardships. Many have no savings and are unable to absorb emergencies, like even unexpected $400 medical bill. A significant portion of these individuals are forced to skip a meal on a daily routine. They skip doctor's appointments and have trouble handling basic living costs. Now, the middle class, this is interesting, right? Middle class is considered $50,000 to $150,000. Households in this tier are experiencing severe squeeze currently. With inflation persistently eroding purchasing power, many have had to cut back entirely on social engagements, vacations, or upgrading their standard of living to make ends meet. Upper class is anything over $150,000. Now, granted, this is considered household income. So we're not talking about individual income. We're talking about Lance makes $75,000. His wife makes $75,000. Together we make $150,000, right? Now, consider this. If your middle class tie-in is $150,000, right? Once again, that scenario. You take 10 years ago with the average house price in Kansas being $133,000. That means that it's less than what we make per year. But now it's $300,000. It's double what we make per year. So how do you afford a home?
Well, that's a good question. The other issue we're having here with our younger kiddos, the Gen Xers, right? Not Gen Xers, I'm sorry, the Z, is it the...
Millennials, Gen Zs, Zennials. Yes,
Z.
which is on the cusp of a millennial and a Gen Z. Before, there was no designation, and now they've got a new designation of those that were right on the cusp.
The ones that are worried about having kids.
Yeah. Yes.
The ones watching the birth rates go down going, I don't think that's a bad thing right now, because at the end of the day, how can I afford to buy a starter home at $300,000? Which is mind-boggling to the majority of us that sit back and think about how hard it was for us to get started, and we think, wow, talk about the hurdles that they're going to have to overcome, and how in tune is leadership when we're at all these wars and things that we're probably going to get into later, spending trillions of dollars in just interest payments as a government right now. And so that is an archetype of what you see in the middle class is we've kind of maximized our lending and the ability to borrow. And if you don't have private sector connections or understand how to get money through angel investors to start small businesses, or people that are looking for investments that'll take a riskier, that have to dump cash at the end of the year. If you don't know how to find those pockets of people or have access to that, and it's frankly not easy, right, to do, because you have to have a track record for people to write you checks in the private world for that stuff. Right. And most people just don't understand that world, right? We're going to work, we're coming home, we're paying our bills, we get our check, we budget that check, we have credit we've extended, and now everything's climbing, and we're having problems paying our average credit card. The last I looked was like 17.5, the average credit card.
That's amazing. That's a lot of debt to be in at a 30% interest.
Every month.
Because credit cards are not.
But does that sound like our government?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the American way, right? I mean, obviously, economies are built on debt, right? If very few people have the ability to just throw down $300,000 on a house, so then they go into debt for that. Same with a car. Most people can't just go buy things outright. Same with business, right? Unless you just all of a sudden become a multimillionaire overnight, win the lottery, right?
Well, even then, though, right, when you have access to how the triggers work, why would you put, when you have $300,000 down towards a house, when you can set things up in a way where you finance that, you still have capital to go out and make more money to pay that house off with things that you're doing out in the private market, that you're earning income with that $300,000 to pay off the house. So in essence, it's not really you paying it off, it's you learning how to use the system for the system to help you pay it off.
Would you call that financial literacy?
I would call that some basic fundamentals to acquiring wealth over time and assets, and leveraging those assets to build infrastructure and systems around you with other people doing the same, and then having the wherewithal to find people that have done it and get next to them and provide value and learn from them and do the same thing they're doing,
right? And
earn your way in, which is not usually easy.
Right. And do you think that that's across the board? Because some would say, there was a lot of scuttlebutt here recently over the announcement that Elon Musk was the first trillionaire.
It's beautiful.
Okay. But I think what a lot of people don't understand when it's like, oh, this trillionaire, he's a trillionaire. Now, granted, I'm not going to say that that there's not some questions along the way, right? And I do not want to get into the weeds as far as, like having this company worth X amount of dollars and borrowing against this company for your other company, and then getting government contracts for this company that didn't go very far, that then the government's involved. Okay, but we're talking about an extremely exceptional individual here, right? Like not everybody goes out and builds rockets, okay? Not everybody tries to endeavor to do all the things that Elon Musk has done. But when you really look at it, okay, is Elon Musk worth $1 trillion, or does he have $1 trillion in the bank that he can just go spend? It's almost like a good thing that people understand here for people in the farming community, okay? And you hear it all the time. Asset rich, cash poor. Asset rich, cash poor. Because you're sitting on 100 acres or 200 or 300 acres, and you have 100 head of cattle, and you have a house on there that's valued at $350,000, and you have a brand new truck that you bought, a Ranch King that you need to do your business. Then you have a combine on top of it. Just taking a snapshot at that, you would say that person is worth $3-4 million. But the reality is because all of that is cyclical, right? Then your profit margin for that isn't one. It's like if I went and I sold all right now today, yes, I could sell it for a couple $1 million, but that doesn't actually mean how much money I have in my bank. Is that a good way to look at that, Andy? Because I think a lot of people get confused. They're like, oh, he's got $1 trillion. He should just, give everybody this whole tax the rich deal. Are we talking about taxing their asset? Are we talking about taxing their income? Because much of what multimillionaires do, and billionaires, and now our trillionaire, is it's all property of the company. Elon Musk, does he own the helicopter outright, or does his company own the helicopter, right?
Yeah, there's some nuances to that, right? So you also have privately held companies that turn into public trading companies, right? And so let's just say you're an employee working for SpaceX, right? And you stay the course with them, and you have shares with that company, and it goes public. The IPO value for SpaceX at $75 billion, with SpaceX trading in the NASDAQ under the ticker SPCX. This is one story. A former welder, Juan Hernandez, who joined in 2015, now holds 6,500 shares worth roughly $1 million after the stock closed at $160. one employee, one welder that helped build that company since 2015, he's now a millionaire.
By investing in that company.
By investing time, earning shares, and staying through the ups and the downs. So as a private company, he was probably getting paid a good wage, stayed loyal, kept working, and ends up now being a millionaire from 2015 to today. And he got paid by working there. And now he's an owner in a privately held company where he's already a millionaire now. Is that $1 million in his bank account?
No, because if you
see where we're going with this?
You took it out and liquidated it, what is it? You'd have to pay capital gains tax on
Andy,
that.
are you worth $1 million? Is it cash million or asset million or there's different ways to become a millionaire. And I will guarantee you, if you have $50 million, or let's just say somebody that has, $500 million, the chance of them having 50 million in cash is almost none. Almost none, because that money's out working. It's out growing. It's out serving the market it's out risking itself. Right. It's working 24/7, 365. It doesn't call in sick.
Right.
These people understand financial literacy to get to that point where they understand dead money in the bank is no good to me.
Right.
They have assets, they have income to live. They're usually on pretty good, strong budgets. They're not worrying about things, but they're not living the way somebody that just got a lotto and got $100 million would live.
Right.
And then end up 6 years with nothing and not knowing how that happened. That would never happen to somebody that understands how the system works.
Correct. And to even say this, the gentleman that we're talking about, and I don't know, I'm just going to hypothesize here, just because he has $1 million worth of assets in the stock market, or because he purchased into SpaceX and what you had just mentioned, does not mean that the guy doesn't own $100,000 still on a $250,000 house, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a car payment. It doesn't mean that he himself is not in debt.
But he can leverage that.
Correct.
He can leverage the fact that he has stock in a company worth
$1 million.
It's security, right? It's another piece of his folder, his portfolio that says, I have some purchasing power, I have some leverage against the marketplace.
Right. If I go into debt and I can't pay that debt, you have a way to get that money back from me because I have X or Y or Z.
So worth nothing, equity worth millions on paper isn't the same as cash in the bank. Lockup periods, stock violations, and taxes can all reduce what employees actually realize. So there's different ways. There's assets, there's properties, there's equity, there's some people have mutual funds, and however they're doing that. There's so many different ways. There's business ownership and what your company is doing outside of your personal stuff, right? So if you own a company, well, it's actually the company is over here and you're over here, but you own that company, right? But there's amount of cash flow that's coming from that company that once you learn how to leverage yourself, that's another asset to you,
right? Of
how you could leverage and use things to grow something else,
right? And something that I want to go back to the 50, 50 to 150, 150 and on up, right? And the reality that when we're talking, how many people are listening to this? First, understanding, right? Second, have money to be able to do what other people or what they foresee other people doing. Like for instance, okay, something I think a lot of people are missed on who are not in business, who don't understand how businesses operate. If your company makes $400,000 last year, right, that doesn't mean that you go and pay yourself $250,000 of that $400,000. You might take out a salary of $60,000. The company car, the company pay for the car, the company pay for the insurance, the company pay for the phone, the company pay for every time that the gas, the company pay for the registration on that vehicle, the company pay for, we could just, your food, right? Your lodging, the company pays for all that, which then turns into a tax write-off, which means that of that $450,000 that you have or that you made, it's going to be less that you pay in taxes. So, and I call this financial literacy because the question becomes how many people listening understand this is how this works, right? And so then the question becomes, as I had read before, a family that makes $50,000 or less, do they have the ability to do that? Is that a reality to somebody?
So here's how this, it depends. A lot of our middle class,
which is that 50 to 150.
They're out of this group. So 8 out of 10 millionaires invested in their 401k plans, and 62% graduated from public or state school rather than prestigious private ones. 8 out of 10 millionaires were built in industries that you would not even imagine. The number one set of millionaires is engineers, right? You know, number 3 is teachers, because they have their pensions. They're putting away slow over a bunch of time. They're mostly in a gap where they get paid, and then they have all their other little things that they get over time.
Right.
So if you were to look at the Dave Ramsey study that was done probably 2 or 3 months ago, it kind of lists out how important middle class America is. And those people that you're talking about are middle class segment, most of us, right, are in this position where we're putting a little bit over time. What happens is a financial literacy when you have doctors who you think would be number one, because let's just say they're making $500,000 a year, whatever their salary is. A lot of them are financially illiterate. They have no idea what to do with their finances unless they have somebody close to them that understands what they're doing.
Right.
And frankly, a lot of them get poached on because a lot of advisors and things know that's a pocket of people that have money that don't really understand. They just trust their advisor to do what's right. And they do for the most part, but there are some fees and charges and products that you could get into that might not benefit the consumer more than other types of products, because you make bigger commissions for selling the thing for the company. That makes the company more money. It's just the way it works, right? But understanding these nuances is so important. So yeah, financial literacy, I think when it comes back to what you're saying, one of the biggest blessings I had in my life was to get into a company where I actually had to be licensed and go out and start doing exactly that, which is working with people and myself with finances and understanding how money flowed and understanding the markets and understanding time value of money and, you know, compounding over time and interest rates and how all that works on the backside, mutual funds versus, there's just a lot of stuff out there.
And a lot of people, they'll pay somebody to do that, right? Like you take somebody, like if you're not, but okay, going back to this, I really...
And this is not soliciting financial advice by any means. I'm just kind of spitballing as a podcast, but and giving information that I've seen online or things that I've studied over the years and been a part of and just watch unfold. But yeah, people would realize that what you're saying is what my fear is, Lance, of everything that you're bringing up is the fact that the millionaires are a lot of regular folks who just did it over time.
Right.
What we get is the flashy rap songs and everything is in the microwave and it's done right away. Yes. And I start this business 6 months later, I'm a millionaire. And it's just not the way it works for 99% of us.
Right.
And I'm an average dude who's looking at a long game, who has had some fortunate things and some mishaps along the way, because it doesn't come without it. But, you know, your willing of abundance will come in proportion to the risk you're willing to take and accept. Win, lose, or draw, right?
Yeah.
So if you're comfortable and you're able to pay your bills and you're able to live with, you know, beneath your means, and you don't want to take risk, you know, you're going to be fine over time as long as you get a good career. Now, there's stats that say married couples living together, staying together, working over a long period of time, focus on common goals is a beautiful thing. And a lot of those millionaires have those structures. The average, so like 4 or 5 years ago, when people hear a millionaire, you think Ferrari, you think all these fancy things. F-150 truck was the most common vehicle owned by most millionaires. Read the book, The Millionaire Next Door. It'll open up your eyes.
Right. And this comes back to you hit on a very good point, right? We're talking about finances and stuff, and I want to circle back, you know. The reality is that we live, and it's statistically proven, in a society where people are spending what they make, the majority are spending what they make or more than what they make, right? So instead of saying, for instance, I find this just fascinating, right? I've gone through the whole process of buying a house, and okay, this is how much I make. Oh, this is the amount you can spend on your house. It's like, well, wait a second. I'm not going to spend 35% of my income on a house, pre-tax, of course, on a house, because I can't afford that. I want to have more disposable income in the event that X, Y, or Z needs to take place. Well, that disposable income, if and in light of what we're talking about, is investable income, right? Somewhere if you take $100 a month and you put it into a stock, right? And then over 30 to 50 years, you will be able to really pull back on that and have something to have for that. But we live in a, like you said, microwave society, right? And it's true. There was conversations about millennials a while back, right? Where, most millennials are disenfranchised. That's my age group of people. I'm a zennial, but people in the 40s, right? Or mid 30s to mid 40s. We'll just call that, right? Are disenfranchised because they don't understand why it is that they didn't immediately walk out of college and get that 6-figure job. And then we live in a society where we're constantly bombarded with this idea that everybody has a 6-figure job. That it's not as common as you really want to think it is, right? This 1%er is not the Elon Musk. The 1%er is nowadays just above being an average Joe. I mean, it really is. But there's also choices,
But even
right?
that person, that had that connection or earned their way, a lot of them will put 7 or 8 years in a company, help it grow, and then end up, if you're with the right company, being blessed by people that understand the value you bring them and see that you see the bigger picture, and they make you part of the family by bringing you in to give you that ability to make a 6-figure job. It doesn't just happen. What I was talking to a friend about this actually yesterday, and this surrounds themselves around a car wash business, believe it or not. And they were in San Antonio, and this friend of mine said that there was people in the car wash there because they have a volume of people, and the industry there's different than it is in Kansas, and everywhere has its own little flavor, right?
Right.
Well, they have these detail car washes that you can do in San Antonio where people will go and sit and they pay $100, right? $99.99, literally. Mm-hmm. And they'll wait 2 hours because they got such a backup that the car doesn't get through. Well, there's a lot of people hanging out that work there that are bitching, whining, moaning, and complaining, but they're working there and they're finding ways to get in the scuttlebutts with the pretty girls sitting out in the front or whatever. And and that's the same person that says if they just had that business for 6 months because they see the cash register and they see how much money's coming in, and they would be a millionaire and they would show everybody how it works, but yet they can't even stay focused on the one part of that one position that they have to help get that business to the next step, not realizing that in the right system, in the right group, people are watching for those other people that do look at production, that are watching numbers, that want to help that location grow, and they want a piece of it, right? And it's like, how do you create that environment for your employees? And in America, that's starting to happen more and more.
Right.
As the world is shifting and AI is coming and moving jobs around, operators are looking at their workforce going, who are my people moving forward, my little group that I can trust? Because you're going to need hands, and you'll have those people in your system. But what are the people that are trying to do an exceptional job while they're here? But the person that complains the most and they're on Facebook and ranting and raving and doing all that stuff, they'll never even focus on the one part of the one position to get noticed. And it's always everybody else's fault. Mindset.
Yes, mindset and discipline, right? Discipline is what comes to mind. And I got to say, just because I want to pose a question to you, and I would call it a challenge question or whatever, but what we're talking about is the opportunity for successes that can arise if you're disciplined and you put forth the effort, the time, the energy, you live frugally, you do the right things, right? You when you enter into a marriage with somebody, you pick somebody that you can be, ride with, and divorce rates are astronomical, and this puts people into a single household income. And okay, so there's so much to unpack there, right? So much to unpack there.
Let me keep going. Then the single household income situation looks to settle with anybody and anything that can help take the financial pressure on. So you bring somebody into your life, and then that creates more. And then that doesn't work, but then that person ended up taking more than you thought they were helping you because you're just trying to survive and live. Hence goes the culture war we have today. And not looking at the actual cost of your lifestyle
choices
and what you
the cost of your choices, right? But then we live in a victim society. Okay, yeah.
Go.
This victim society, right? Where and I see it over and over and over again. It just blows my mind. I am responsible for every choice I ever made. I accept that. I accept that I've made some poor choices in my life. I'm responsible for that. I made some good choices in my life and I've reaped some benefits because of that. I'm responsible for that. I am only in control of me, right? But we live in a culture and a society where I'm a victim, right? The reason this happened is anything other than my fault, right? And it makes it impossible for people to grow, right? And then you have a culture, and I'm seeing it right now. We see it, and then we always want to fault the school, right? We're going roundabout. We'll get back on track here, folks. But then parents want to fault a school system for their kids not being educated appropriately, while they put no skin in the game to get that accomplished, right? And then when little Johnny or little Susie has a hiccup, right? It's the judge's fault that they sentenced them to that. It's the prosecution's fault that they prosecuted them. It's the police officer's fault. It's the other kid's fault. It's not my kid's fault. It's everybody else's fault except for my kid, regardless of the heinous things that my child may have chosen to do to a victim.
Even better, it's not my kid's fault, but there's another reach through. It has nothing to do with them and their actions.
Of course not.
Their preparation.
Of course not. Of course not.
And their lack of follow through with their own family, their own kid, their own home team, I call it.
Right.
Their own inability to manage home team disrupts other home teams.
Correct.
So all my family can do is work on home team the best we can with all of our dysfunction, knowing that our home team is pretty damn strong. And we have expectations, and not everybody likes it all the time, but that hopefully will spill out into other home teams. And if not, well, we just won't associate with other home teams.
And that is okay. So with that being said, Andy, okay, and I got a challenge question for you, okay? Because I saw something come across our dear President Trump, and I just was kind of taken aback. Okay, so if really what we're talking about, because I broke down that under 50 and then the 50 to 150, right? And it said, who's struggling the most? People under $50,000 a year are struggling the most.
That's rough.
When you take, let's say, a community such as ours, we're just kind of zeroing in, right, on our community with the amount of kids, we'll just say, that are on free and reduced lunches. So that's a snapshot of, we're looking at the people under 50,000 here. Okay, the families that are making less than 50,000, and I would say, generally speaking, that's going to be single parent homes. All right, because it's just going to wind up being that. For those individuals, okay, would you tell them that if you're having affordability issues, maybe you should try eating for sustenance rather than enjoyment? A bread and butter sandwich will fill you up just as much as a Big Mac. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. Do you think it's like he gets a bad rap, okay? And I give him a bad rap, and I understand this, and I could say all this stuff about him being out of touch and all this type of stuff. But do you think it just comes down to lack of communication skills? I want to give the guy a pass. Well, I want to say what he's saying is go and make food at your home, right? And eat at your house, then instead of going out and grabbing for some kind of a convenience. I'll give him some credit. But we were talking about bread and butter sandwiches last week on the program.
Yeah.
I've eaten them.
Yeah, that's a loaded question because, some people do need to say things to wake people up because a lot of these families, I know of somebody, and I'm not going to say names to be disrespectful, but they were struggling, right? And we all struggle at different levels, that's for damn sure, depending on, how you're playing your own life game. But my son has a buddy or whatever, and long story short, there was some needs there, and we were able to do some stuff. And a week later, Uber Eats was bringing in, or whatever, that delivery system, while we were picking up a kiddo, walking in food into a house. And I'm like we go out to eat in sports season maybe once a week.
Right.
And it's like a treat. We did it. Matter of fact, yesterday, it was Subway, right?
Probably got some coupons in the mail.
We did.
So you get 3 foot longs for,
like $9,
like,
right?
yes.
And then the little wrap things for like $3. It was like $32, and we were complaining.
Right. Right. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was like $32, and we were like, dang, we just spent $32. Dang, on dinner. That's crazy, We did get some cookies we didn't need, like 4 cookies.
The cookies
right?
did it.
Cookies did doggone it, And of course, since I'm dad, I got the 1 coupon with the meal deal.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I actually got a small drink and a bag of chips. I went all out.
I love it.
But this is we were there, right? We drove there. We used the coupons. We went home. We ate together. And for me to see, again, what I'm getting at here is sometimes you have to just say what you have to say, and people don't like that. And the message is like, start going to the grocery store and cooking, because you'll have people, you'll see it at tax season, right? The restaurants get full, and the expensive restaurants, right? And we don't actually go out as much, but I noticed this year's past where you'll get like one of them. Trust me, I love to go, that place where you do all the crawfish and you dump it out on the table.
I love this place. Andy, our minds think together. Hook and Reel.
Hook and Reel.
And then there's another one across town, but that's my favorite place to go.
I love that. But you know how much it costs?
Yeah, $100 for 2 people.
It's ridiculous. It's like, that's groceries for the whole week for us. You know what I mean?
Yes, it is.
It's like, so it's just a treat. It's not a maybe once a quarter thing.
Right.
Or a birthday kind of thing that you go there and you enjoy it. And then you thank God we're in a position sometimes where you just get what you want, right? Because we don't do it often, right? So it's like, okay, just do what you want. Everybody gets what, no hold back,
no
just
pressure.
have a good time, right?
Yeah.
And this is a treat, not a regular occurrence. But I had a mentor tell me one time, he says, Andy, I'd rather have a Walmart bag with $4,000 in it than a Gucci bag with $1 in it. People need to think.
Do you think it comes down to perspective? Okay, but I go back to this. This is this constant.
It's entitlement, bro. You're in America. Right. Sorry. I'm not going to tippy-toe around. This is the stuff people don't like. Because everybody has a story, including me. I come from the ghetto, dude. Like a real ghetto. The 6th largest city in the United States. Yeah. Like the hardest of the hardest area in that city. I get it. I totally get it. I mean, I could take anybody that wants to go home and visit my place and go to the parks that I grew up in. The guys are still there. I can introduce you to them. I get it. But at some point in America, you got to bob, weave, and shift. You either put yourself out there or you don't. That's not on anybody else. And sometimes you have to eat bologna sandwiches for a while.
Right.
But we get to eat bologna sandwiches. Yeah. You get it?
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I mean, if you break down, let's just talk about a bologna sandwich, right? I'm not saying it's the best for you health-wise or whatever, but it's definitely better than a Big Mac, I can promise you. But if you break down what a bologna sandwich costs, you might be talking like 30 cents. By the time you get your 2 slices of bread, your 1 slice of cheese, your 1 slice or 2 slices of bologna if you're feeling frisky.
Now, if context is doing it because we're at war and you need to suck it up, that's a different kind of conversation. The old school America where the women went to start working in the factories to help build bombs because their men went off to fight a war. Like the America that made us who we are, the people who built us, whole different conversation. Right. So that this is not really to me, it's not lined up right. Right. And that's just my opinion, right? Because I hear what you're saying, but there's so much more context behind why he's saying that. And so many more other things that rub people, like, again, mental health. There's people that need us to sacrifice. Like, they can't. They can't. And some people, they can't for a season.
Right.
And that's okay too. Let's start separating apples and oranges and stop putting everybody in the same bucket. Because a guy like me has zero excuses. Zero. My mentors, the people around me, the opportunities I've been given, the way I choose to see the world. There was a season in my life when I needed some help. And thank God people were there for me, because this amazing country and the people that allowed me some grace, and they still give it to me, frankly. But at the end of the day, we're all at different places and different seasons. And there's some of us that truly cannot do it. And what are we doing to subsidize the most needy, the people that are the most vulnerable, from our little kiddos who can't do it yet, right? 16, 17 years old. You better start pulling the plane up, right? The world's going to be tough if you have a brain on you.
Right.
But mental health, mental illness, there's a lady out at the 500 building from time to time, right here in our own community. She needs to be in a hospital, dude. She's not okay. She can't do it. No matter what we do or how much you pray for her at this point in time, and God could do anything. I believe that. But she's not in a good place. She needs to be in a hospital before somebody hurts her or she hurts somebody else, or both, right? And so,
but we don't got any place for them to go.
But we're spending trillions of dollars on war. This is that. I want to line up the shot, right?
Right.
You see where I'm trying to go with that?
Okay, so let's talk about this. So my next question, and it would take us down a real slippery slope, and people understand where we're at. I mean, we talk a lot about government. I mentioned last week on the program that government is involved in every single aspect of our life, and I think we have painted this picture at this point in time, at least up to this point in the podcast, last podcast and previous podcasts, is that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on government. Now, for once, Andy, we're all wanting government to get together, right? We just want them to pass something that's beneficial for the American public, for the American people. Why can't Congress get together and do this? Well, for once, Congress did here recently. And they passed the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. Okay, and I'm not going to go into it. Look it up. It's the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. And this passed by extreme veto majority proof, which means you had in the Senate, I think, a couple, or a couple would be two. So you had a few, that would be three, right? But you had a very small group of senators that voted against it. Okay, but you also had a very small group of representatives that voted against it. Not enough to make any difference at all. And what it hopes to do is, we'll just say it, make it more affordable for Americans to buy homes. Okay, and a way in which we can have more housing instead of less. And it's just being very 10,000 foot view here. And it also, which I think is very interesting, which, really poking the bear here, but we've seen a run on these large corporations with extreme funding, or unlimited funding, if you want to look at it that way, that are seeing the housing market as a good way to invest their money, which it is. If I'm a business and I go buy a house for $150,000 and 30 years from now it's worth $300,000, of course I would do that. I'm doubling my money. Okay. And one thing you're guaranteed of is if you invest in housing, it's going to go up. It's going to go up. And if you look at what we said at the beginning of the program, which the average home price in the state of Kansas was $133,000 10 years ago, and today it's $300,000. Well, then you basically just doubled your money over 10 years. So when people are looking for a place to invest. So what it's hoping to do is limit corporations from going and buying homes, and therefore leaving more on the housing market for individuals that want to be first-time home buyers. Now, Trump vows to veto it, Andy. Mm-hmm. They pass it, and he wants to veto it because he wants for the SAVE Act to be passed. Now, I don't understand the semantics here, because when you know that you have a veto majority proof legislation, all that means is that you're going to veto it, it's going to go right back, they're going to pass it, you're going to veto it, it's going to go right back, and then it's going to go into legislation, or it's going to go into law.
So you don't understand why he's doing it?
I think it's a play, but I don't understand how it's a strong one.
Oh, it's just causing attention to the most ridiculous thing that we can't get together here, which is having people shipped all over the country to vote in elections they shouldn't be voting.
I disagree. I disagree on this, Andy.
That's all right. Let's disagree.
Here's why I disagree. Okay. Although each state is responsible for what parameters they put on how easy it is to vote, if you want to look at it this way, there's lots of court rulings, right? And you can say, and I'm going to get into this. I mentioned this that I was going to cover the constitutional amendment that we're facing here in Kansas, both pro and for, and I'm going to do that. So I just want to, I'll say this. Interesting. This is kind of one of the things I'm going to bring up is, the Supreme Court is bad if it goes against legislation that you want passed. But it's good if it goes for legislation that you want passed, right? Or for rulings that they have that are in your favor. They're all good. They're the best. They're the greatest. They're the most wonderful Supreme Court. If they limit New York State's ability to allow for somebody to conceal carry in the state of New York, regardless of what community they're in. But by God, if all of a sudden the Supreme Court rules that, well, you can't limit somebody's right to vote, right? Like so going with this, right? I do not believe that there is the amount of fraud that people try to say that there is when it comes to our elections.
I totally disagree depending on the county you're in, just like the fraud that's going on with Medicaid that they just found and other major frauds that are going on with government funding and how people are manipulating the system. If you look at just 10 minutes and look at Fulton County in Georgia, just look at that one county and how big it is and all the systems they have in place and all. There are pockets in this country that are bastardizing our system to get what they want. That's what people do. It's a fair game. And I think it's fair to focus in on those populations that are saying you don't need an ID when you go to the voting booth. I think that's ridiculous. So we can disagree on that.
Okay, but we're not talking about an ID here. Okay, this legislation goes in and
encompasses everything.
Says you got to have a birth certificate, you got to have a passport, and then
why are they doing that though?
I think the reason they're doing this is because some states will issue an ID without the need for some proof of citizenship.
Well, illegal immigrants can get an ID.
Yes. And then if your only requirement is to have an ID to vote.
But then that spins up a whole bunch of other issues that they've been finding though.
Okay, but take this for instance, Andy. In the state of Kansas, we did the real ID.
The state of Kansas is different than the national, right?
Agreed.
And I think we're pretty good in the state, and we just actually put in, I think it was like 16 more refinements about 3 or 4 years ago to make it even stronger when this was a bigger topic, right? After Trump lost that last election, which neither here nor there. Again, look at Fulton County and tell me there's no cheating going on.
Now that might be,
that's mass scale cheating. It's scary,
and I will say,
and that has to do with electronic machines. It has to do with, and anybody that says if that thing is hooked up to the internet, they're just naive.
Okay, but then go back into our own local community, right? Now it is Kansas law. Okay, now to say that a voting machine cannot be able to be accessed wirelessly. And so go with this. Go with this. Okay, I want to say this.
There's people in Russia and China laughing at that right now.
Okay, but why is it now? Okay, I just got to say, Andy, why is it that when my guy wins, there's no corruption or fraud?
Yeah.
But when somebody wins that I don't like, it's corruption and fraud.
Yeah. Good
and
point.
So this is where I'm coming from, the perspective to say, no, I'm sure that at different times and places there is corruption in our voting system,
1,000%.
right? And in some states, I'm sure there's more than others. Mm-hmm, okay, mm-hmm. But going back to the fact that I think that's the exception. I don't believe that's the rule. I don't believe that, for instance, we'll go the most recent election, Thomas Massey and the other guy. I can't even remember his name. Yeah. Right? Nobody remembers his name. They just voted against Thomas Massey because they saw the AI video that showed him walking into a hotel room and believed it. But okay, so
oh man.
So okay, so I could say, Andy, oh, that was interference, election interference. That's election interference. Everybody knows Thomas Massey should have won. He was the greatest. He was the best. He was the grandest. He was the one. And this other guy won. That's election interference. There's some kind of an election interference. Somebody hacked the AIPAC hacked the machines. You see what I'm saying? I mean, and then go back to, okay, so the Supreme Court has ruled that you can't stop mail-in ballots. already. If I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken on that, folks, but I believe that there's been a Supreme Court ruling. I'll look it up if I just hand it over to Andy, but a Supreme Court ruling that says you cannot restrict a mail-in ballot.
Yeah, look at Fulton County. Just spend 10 minutes on it. It'll blow your mind. It's a big place. Georgia is a very important state, right, when it comes to voting, right? You would agree?
I would agree.
And look at Fulton County. Just look at it. Just spend a little bit of time. Look at what happened. Look at the dodging. Look at the way all of that went down. And then explain to me why some of the voting in some of these counties are more than the actual people that live in them. Registered voters. Like there's nuances that are messed up, right? And we've got to figure that out. And I think this, so the bottom line for me is it's going to pass. But it's a way Trump is a master marketer genius guy, right? Evil genius, if you want to call him that. He's still a genius because people call him stupid, and that's so wild to me. It's like, okay, how many billions have you made? Anyways, and then he's a bad businessman. Okay, they're the guy at the car wash pissed off because they can't hook up with the chick that's there, much less do their job. But anyways, so when you look at this whole situation, he's just calling attention to an issue that we have in this country that's growing, that has been found out. I mean, look at what's happening in California even, and some of those things has been brought up recently. He's also shining a light for issues that, he wants talking points out in the communities for people to be aware and hyper vigilant, just like he did with his campaign. They actually had targeted places in the United States where they had specific teams sent to on this last election to counter where they believed the majority of the voter fraud was going, and that was built with apps and algorithms and things. So that was part of Trump's strategy when he won, when all those swing states flipped. There was an actual strategy of how they were going to collect and put people accountable if they did certain things to cheat. And do you think it's just an accident that all of a sudden all that happened the way it did?
No, I don't.
You see, but it's corrupt at a high level, dude.
Oh, absolutely.
And is it enough in most places? No. But is it enough in some of the right places that actually swing this sucker one way or the other? Yeah, people are strategizing, dude. I think it's the art of war once again, right?
Right.
Where are you focused on, right? Where are the little aim small, miss small? And I'll send you an article about what his campaign manager was doing during that election and why they were doing it, and how they methodically went after the swing states and the places in those swing states and how they set up around the voting system.
Right. And I got a question for the audience here, okay?
The numbers were way different from the last election to this election by extreme measures.
Right.
So that tells you, what is that 8 or 9% difference? Not 1 or 2%. Where did all this come from? How come it just swung like that?
Right.
Anyways.
Right. Okay, so for the audience that's listening right now, okay, I'm not going to say right now whether I'm decided on whether the SAVE Act is the best course of action in order to secure our election. So I just want to ask the question, okay, do you feel or do you believe that elections are stolen? Do you believe that there is rampant corruption and fraud when it comes to elections? And then I pose the question to the listener, however you answer that, yes or no. If you answer it yes, then does that mean that when your guy wins or your gal wins, that you still believe that there's corruption or fraud and that might be aiding them into their election and being elected? Or if you say no, then the question becomes whether or not you just accept it for how it is, no holds bar, etc.
I personally believe only when a Democrat wins that it's fraud.
Well, of course.
Because the Republicans will never, ever do anything like that.
No.
So we just have to, one, set the base of understanding that the Republicans don't do that. That's not how we operate.
Agreed.
So just for all those people that don't understand this, I just want to make that plain.
Yeah, of course.
Then as I go through this, I also want to say this. Some people are going crazy right now. We got turned off by like 30% of the audience.
And we got somebody's radio is broken in their car right now.
No, but the reality is, And this is how I believe, Lance. When you have people involved and you want to win something and little tribes get together on opposite sides, I believe fraud's always there, somewhere in the middle. It's just to what degree.
Right. Well, and I tell you, if you're looking, I mean, and I will say this, if you, I've seen the way people operate and behave come election times, right? And primary elections, boy, and we were going to, I sent Andy a note and said, I'd like to just revisit primary elections, but I don't know if there's anything really there to be said, except for the fact that I have seen people act in the worst ways. Politics, in a nutshell, brings out the best in people. We'll just say that. And when you talk about deception, lies, and propaganda, then it's a realization that people have got to wake up. They've got to wake up. They've got to wake up. And to know that I've seen some of the underhanded, dishonest, devious things that people will do during primaries and during elections. Maybe you're right, Andy. Maybe if those people had a little bit of power, they would utilize it in that way. Because if they can't show discretion as it is with their hatred towards other people and what they're willing to do, and without ethics and without character, and act totally outside of themselves in small ways, then what would they do if they were in power in other ways?
Well, we've seen people at a local level assume what they believe is power, and it is because they're elected officials, that choose to swing something one way or the other, and then just totally are willing to just bypass even policy that they called out, worried about me doing. And I actually voted to put that policy into place because they thought they were being slick, and I saw it, and I'm like, whatever, right? It's not a threat to me. But then they go and violate the same policy that they actually authored to put in place at the board because it was inconvenient for them at the time. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I literally walked through that.
It's good for me.
And I also didn't call it out like I could have, just because I picked my battles. I'm like, whatever, people are crazy and I don't play with crazy. Let them be crazy, right? My life is, I got too many other high level things to worry about in my little world to worry about somebody's, stuff. But no, man, I've seen people, brother, and you have too. It's like, I think you hit the nail on the head, Lance. We justify what we want. We both do it.
Right.
But it's about checking each other and ourselves and going, hey, dude, really? Are you really like leaning too far? They tell me why, right? Because the Republicans, there's people out there, and it's a big group that as long as it's a Republican ticket, they're never wrong.
Right.
And the Democrats, frankly, I believe are a little worse because I'm leaning more towards the Republican side, right? 100%, especially with this gender ideology crap. That's just wild to me, right? The surnames and the pronouns and the LGBTQ plus.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Well, it just got to the point where we just want to incorporate everything, and it can't be an alphabet soup, so we have to put plus in order to...
LGBTQ plus.
Right.
And it's like, all these things that we're just, this culture is just so wild to me. It's the common sense and the bathroom issues, and we have these trans issues to normalize this stuff going into schools. Like, the kids are asking for that. Like, there's just so much weird going on, right? And I know people cringe when I say that because you want to be caring and loving, but there's at some point you tell somebody, no, that's just not appropriate.
Well, I go back to this, and this is where I think the real argument is when it comes to individual rights, individual liberties, okay? I am 100% okay in every way, shape, or form with somebody choosing to live a life that they deem their happiness, whatever that might be, okay? If Andy wants to live a certain way, Andy can live a certain way. If Bobby Sue wants to learn, or Sue Bobby, I do not care, okay? But I think the role of government, especially in today's times, is to ensure that my rights don't end where your rights begin, or vice versa, right? Like, like we're talking about the public space here. So that means that your rights trump mine? No. I don't agree with that. Okay, we're coming into the program, Andy. We're all over the place this week.
Yeah, my bad. That was my fault. Hey, I took way too much mic time.
We had a good conversation, and that's the key. And we'd like for you to have a conversation with us. I will say that. So without further ado, Andy, what's your last word, my man?
Man, comments, opinions, help me grow, guys. There's a lot of context that we don't cover. I've got to get better, and I was telling Lance today before we turned on the mics and the cameras that I speak in shorthand. I listen to podcasts and work all day long, every day. So I'm probably too far up in the weeds with just trying to poke around and get better and learn myself, because I don't want to be manipulated, right? And the amount of manipulation is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And just remember, 60% of the online traffic is bots.
It is, and that's insane.
And there are titles and pictures that will lead you to go one way or the other, depending on what the computer thinks you want. So be smart, stay informed, and be careful not to be duped and tricked, because many of us are just getting what we want fed back to us, and it's growing our own perspective bias. That way we stop listening and hearing what the other person's actually saying. Stop mutilating children. Stop cutting off penises at 9. Love you guys.
We almost got through without having to be... We're YouTube, I swear to God. Okay, so I want to say this before I say something else, and I'll get my final word because I had a quote I wanted to read. But I want people to really think about this, right? Where you have freedom of speech, right? We talk about a time with the advent of social media and all of these digital online platforms, and how it has injected steroids into our ability to have a platform to exercise our First Amendment free speech rights. And before, it was certain newspapers, certain news outlets. You go back to the 80s and you got your CBS, NBC, ABC. You didn't have MSNBC. You didn't have all these other platforms to be able to hear and listen and consume information. So we think on the offset, or on the outs. We think in the beginning that somehow or another, because we have all of these platforms, that now that just means that anybody can just put whatever out there, and that those algorithms, and they're still gatekeepers, folks. That's what I'm saying. They're still gatekeepers. Everything that you say, everything that you see is manufactured and engineered for you to see it, and usually tailored specifically to what it thinks that you want to see. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this, my final word is, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2016, signed in 2015. Now, I want you to look this up. National Defense Authorization Act of 2016, signed in 2015, quietly rescinded the ban. For the first time in decades, it became legal for the government to direct propaganda at its own population. You're being propagandized, folks, by your own government. Have a good one, everybody. All right.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Both sides.
Both sides. Who's ever in power?